Now, the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt was supposed to have reopened in both directions under phase one of Donald Trump's ceasefire agreement. That hasn't happened. Israel now, however, says it will allow a limited reopening once it has recovered the remains of the last hostage from Hamas in Gaza. This following a visit by U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of the U.S. president. We can now go across to our correspondent, Noga Tarnopolsky, standing by in Jerusalem. Noga, so what is happening? Is this border crossing going to reopen?
Well, I wish my answer to your question could be as clear as the question itself. We don't really know. Israel did sign on the Trump ceasefire agreement, one of which, on one of their commitments of the Israeli government was that they would permit the Rafah border crossing to open with Egyptian and Palestinian guards, border guards in place. That has absolutely not happened, despite the fact that three times, facing U.S. pressure, the Israeli government has announced the border crossing at Rafah will open this week or tomorrow. It's never happened. This time, there has been, again, immense pressure by the Trump administration, and the Israeli government issued a very murky, mysterious statement in the evening of that visit saying, basically, yes, but not really. It said that the border crossing will open under the terms of the Trump ceasefire agreement, but that it will happen only after the body of the final Israeli hostage still buried in Gaza is returned to Israel. And then it went on to say that only one part of that only the transfer of people from Gaza to Egypt will happen, that goods cannot go through, that into Gaza it's not going to let anyone through. So it really is unclear. Another thing we've heard here, confusing matters even more, Delano, is that Israel may open a kind of alternate Rafah border crossing. That is being discussed right now, and it was apparently discussed during the Witkoff and Kushner visit, meaning that Israel could say, well, we don't know what's happening at Rafah, but we're in charge of this other border crossing, sort of canceling out this obligation it has under the ceasefire terms to open Rafah by opening an alternate nearby border crossing that its forces would control. In short, we don't know. It is an obligation, and the Palestinian leadership, that's supposed to be the alternative Palestinian leadership for Gaza, has announced firmly that the border crossing will open and that Egyptian and Palestinian Authority guards will be on site.
Noga, we're supposed to be in phase two of Donald Trump's ceasefire agreement, yet the Israeli government still does not allow foreign journalists access to Gaza. How can the Netanyahu government continue to justify this move?
Well, under the law of Israel, it can't really. In Israel, journalists have freedom of expression and freedom to work as they wish. So it's a complicated scenario. And today, just this morning, there was the final hearing at the Supreme Court, of which we at France 24 are a party. The Foreign Press Association of Israel and Palestine has petitioned the Israeli government to let us in to do our work in Gaza. The government's response today, and this has been much delayed, I can't remember, possibly the sixth delay here, Delano. The government's response, though, touched on Gaza, which is a very interesting point, on Rafah, excuse me. Some of the judges asked the government's representatives, since we're in a ceasefire, why can't journalists go in? Humanitarian workers go in. Why can't journalists go in? There were all kinds of explanations made about the safety of journalists. And then one of the judges specifically said, well, why don't they just go in through Rafah? Our attorney said they are based in Israel and they have the right to work from Israel. And then the question of Rafah came up, and the government attorney said explicitly, well, if it opens, we'll see. So we're seeing the government, on the one hand, in formal statements, while Witkoff and Kushner are here saying, yes, it'll open in some way. And yet the government attorney to the Supreme Court said, we don't even know if it will open. And that will also affect, of course, our ability to work in Gaza.